Welcome back to another episode of Buckeye Talk live on YouTube. I'm Stephen Means. That's Stefan Krajisnik, and that is Andrew Gillis. And we are all coming to you from our hotel rooms in Dallas because Ohio State will play Miami in the Cotton Bowl in a couple of days here. Get the text 614-350-3315. It's going to be our last live show for at least a week and a half. I guess we'll see what happens, right, over the next couple of weeks. They got to get through Miami, and then we'll see how some things go here. But Brendan is with us through the playoff, and then we're going to try to fight for more time after that. That's how we're doing this. Every week is a fight to keep producer Brendan along with us because these graphics, as you can see here, are amazing. He does a lot of other stuff too. It's just this is the thing you guys see weekly on the live show. If you go follow us on all the social media platforms he made for us, you'll see the other things he does for us. We're ranking quarterbacks today. We're ranking the 8 quarterbacks left in the college football playoff. That is Georgia's Gunnar Stockton. That is Fernando Mendoza from Indiana. That is Ohio State's Julian Sayin. That is Texas Tech's Baron Morton. That is Miami's Carson Beck. That is Oregon's Dante Moore. That is Ole Miss's Trinidad Chambliss and Alabama's Ty Simpson. But before we get into ranking those 8 quarterbacks left in the bracket, I did want to talk about the 4 guys who have since been eliminated from the bracket, maybe talk about them and where we had them amongst each other. We all put those on one graphic. And Stefan, I guess I'll start with you. Like, we all have Marcel Reed at number 1. Was that like the easiest one of the 4 to do for you?
Yeah, I think so. When you look at the way he played this season, and there were spurts where it seemed like he was maybe even part of the Heisman conversation. I shouldn't even say spurts. I mean, it was into November that he was still part of the Heisman conversation to some extent. It looked like he might be a guy who goes to New York. So yeah, I think that was probably the easiest of these 4. And I would be curious if we were to rank the top 9 quarterbacks in the playoff, right? I think it would be the 8 that we have plus Marcel Reed. And I wonder if he would maybe be even higher. I'd argue he probably would be, higher, maybe a top 5, top 6 quarterback of the, top 9, top 10 in the college football playoff this year. So yeah, I'm a fan of Marcel Reed. I don't know what his game translates to like in the NFL. And there were highs and lows with him this season, but you look at the way he developed going into this year and what he can be moving forward. I'm a fan of Marcel Reed. I'm sure he's going to be, because I think he has eligibility. I'm sure he's going to be part of the Heisman conversation next year, at least going into the season.
Andrew, where would Marcel Reed have slid in for you had we extended this to 9?
I think if I had extended this out, he's definitely flirting with top 5. I don't think he's not getting into my top 3, and I think there's kind of a debate with 4 and 5. You guys know I'm very high on Marcel Reed. Like, I had Marcel Reed in the Heisman, finalists like before the year started. I think when we talked about Marcel Reed and kind of maybe what Ohio State avoided, I think Marcel, he runs in a manner that is not just kind of straight line speed. You almost hesitate to say anybody's like this guy, but he moves a little like Lamar, where it's just so quick lateral movement. Like the quickness is just, that's unmatched. And that's just the way that, you look at the rest of the playoff field and you're like, nobody else has a running threat like that. So, that matters a lot, but there were also just throws against Miami that he was just airmailing and that he was just completely missing. So, it's hard to kind of knock him from, the top, or knock anybody from like the top 3 or 4 or 5 or so. But I mean, when we talk about some of these names that are still in the playoff and in terms of quarterbacks, pretty hard case to make Marcel Reed behind some of these guys.
I think if Ohio State hadn't played Damon Williams earlier this year, we would have been going into last week being like, whoa, that could be a tough matchup if they have to play Marcel Reed. But we saw them against Damon Williams, so then we were like, it's fine, they got Arvell Reese.
Gillis, you would have had Marcel Reed in your top 5 had they beaten up Miami?
No, I don't think top 5, but I think 6. I think I would have had him 5, 6 definitely, and I would have had a really, really hard time ranking 5 or 6.
Where would you have had him on your list, Stefan?
Probably in the same range, 5 or 6, probably.
I don't want to have a long conversation about Marcel Reed, so I'm not going to go too depth. Like, I don't know, man. I think he's a great runner, But I think there's only one quarterback who's in the next round who I would 100% take him over. I think everybody else, even Carson, even at the bottom of where I think our list is going to be, like those guys like Carson Beck and Trinidad James, like the bottom of our list, I think I might take them because they can throw it. His arm talent isn't necessarily the same as some of those other guys, but those are our lists. The only real differences we have here is I had Reslav at number 4, and Stefan, you have a power 4 quarterback at number 4. No love for the September Heisman Trophy winner.
Retzlaff was pretty decent when he was playing with power 4 talent around him, and Barnett could probably do the same. So there was John Mateer going into the playoff was like the lowest rated quarterback of the 12 starters in the playoff. John Mateer had a great September, and I think it's maybe stained, or I guess put in a brighter light, just how bad he was after September. And I know there was the injury, but I mean, he was healthy enough to start like the last 7 games or whatever it was of Oklahoma season. So I'm surprised we haven't got a report yet being like, this is what he battled through and this is why he struggled, so they could boost his stock a little bit. I'm sure maybe that's coming at some point. But yeah, there was no part of me that would have wanted John Mateer at quarterback going into this playoff.
Okay, so 8 quarterbacks from 8 to 1. Brennan has not told me what the list is, but he did give me some heads up on what the list might end up looking like. So I think here's how this is going to go. There's going to be a section of this where we're going to go, oh man, look at us, being more like than I thought we would. Then there's going to be a section where I think we might fight a little bit. And then there's going to be a section where I'm going to go, oh man, look at us. Maybe this wasn't that interesting of an exercise. But here we are for the next hour and 15 minutes doing this exercise. Hit me, Brennan, with number 8. Baron Morton, 2,643 yards, 22 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He also completed 67% of his passes, which led the Big 12 this year. Gillis, as you can see, all of us have him at number 8. The Texans also have him at number 8. This is just like how we did the coaches, where it's us 3 plus the Texans all combined, and that's how we get the consensus list. But we're all talking about our individual list. When Gillis, you found out we were doing this, like Morton was clear number 8, and then your list starts, and why, if that's true?
Yeah, I think so. Which it is crazy to say because look at the numbers on the screen. Which I know there are some people watching and some people that are listening to this. 2,600 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, 4 picks, and a 72.2 QBR. Completion percentage 67%. I don't know. Seems pretty good to me. It seems like you'll take that, right? It's like one of those things where it's like, well, yeah. So, and what's your point? I'm curious to hear where your guys' rankings go, and I think there's going to be an interesting conversation around like 3, 4, and 5 about this. Like how much you guys factored in the eye test with this. I don't know about you guys the morning of, or I guess technically it was the afternoon of the Big Ten championship game. We had a runway to the entire Texas Tech BYU game, and we were able to just watch it. And I remember sitting there with our columnist Jimmy Watkins. We were watching the game together, and I just kept looking back at him, and I was like, I've watched Texas Tech a couple times this year, and I'm not that impressed. I think he's fine. I think he's dependable. I think in terms of Big 12 play, he's solid. I don't think there's much else there that really can get, opened up here. So, I look at Morton and I'm like, you know what? I wonder what happens when I know Oregon's defensive line is probably not as good as it was a year ago, but you start to wonder what happens if you start to see some speed that maybe you haven't seen this year. So I have him at 8. I think it was just kind of a safer pick to have him at 8. I haven't really been impressed. I haven't looked at him and went, wow, Texas Tech is winning in spite of their quarterback. I haven't been wowed.
So he got 46% of the 8th place votes and 26% of the 7th place votes. The consensus was he was going to be number 8. Stefan, if he put up these exact same numbers, but Texas Tech played in the Southeastern Conference or the Big Ten Conference, would he still be number 8?
Probably not. He'd probably getting a bit more respect. His numbers are so interesting to me because, I think he's pretty decent, and those numbers back it up. and obviously he's led Texas Tech to, an outstanding season. He's battled injuries himself. So I know, like, if you look at big time throws and turnover worthy plays on Pro Football Focus, he's kind of middle of the pack in terms of big time throws among the 8 quarterbacks still left in the playoff. A little bit higher in turnover worthy percentage. You take some of those counting stats with a grain of salt because he's got the fewest pass attempts among the guys in the field, and also he's played, like I said earlier, 11 games, which is fewer than anyone else in the field. But if you go percentage wise instead of counting numbers, big time throws, like he's in terms of big time throw percentage, he's up there. He's second among the quarterbacks, only behind Dante Moore. So like he's taken some shots and made some really impressive throws. So when I look at his turnover worthy percentage and it's the highest among these quarterbacks, I'm okay with that because he's making some big plays too, right? But then his average depth of target is like 6th in the field. So it's like these numbers don't really make a whole lot of sense to me, right? Because he's making big plays. He's also making turnover worthy plays, and his depth of target isn't exactly toward the top. So it's a bit of a compelling case, just exactly what he is. But I think he's done a good job leading this team. I think putting him at 8th, I think maybe more than anything, made me realize that the quarterbacks left in the field are actually pretty good. Like I feel pretty good about the 7 guys ahead of him. And sometimes you're just kind of a default selection. Someone has to be 8th. And he's probably been the one who's been the least tested this year and had the, I guess, lowest amount of good moments. So I'm intrigued by what he does against Oregon because that's a pretty good Oregon defense. It's not one of the 3 or 4 best defenses in the playoff, but it's a pretty good defense, and this will be a good test for him. So I do also I think there's an element of playing to what your team needs you to do. And with the defense that they've had this year, I don't think we can't look at Julian Sayin and say, hey, he was great against Texas because he did what Ohio State needed him to do because his defense was outstanding in that game. And then not look at Texas Tech and say, well, their defense has been outstanding every game, right? And there's been times where he's had, I talked about the turnover-worthy plays. Like he's looking at 4 picks on the year, but there's been times where he's maybe put them in a little bit of danger. But overall, he's kind of done what Texas Tech has needed him to do. So I struggle to kind of knock him for that because of how we talk about Julian Sayin at times. So I would not be surprised if he put together a couple good playoff games here and we kind of look at ourselves and say, hey, maybe we just weren't giving this guy enough respect throughout the regular season.
So question for you guys real quick, because I think Baron Morton is a really good guy to ask this question to kind of let people know maybe how we viewed the whole thing. I think we've all agreed to some degree that it's really unfair to look at Julian Sayin and say, but he's got super weapons, so you have to just say he's clearly not as good as it seems because we don't think that that's fair to Julian Sayin. But I also, in that same breath, I would say that it's probably fair to point out the guys who maybe don't have that level of weapon, right? The guys who maybe don't have that, hey, that superstar receiver, hey, that kind of weapon receiver. So how much did you guys think of that, specifically with Morton in terms of level of competition and in terms of how you viewed the quarterbacks in this bracket of maybe what they had in their offense and what they were throwing to? Or who
I asked myself, all 8 quarterbacks,
mm-hmm.
would this team be a national championship contender if he was their quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer with every single one of them, even his own team, is no. If Texas Tech somehow wins a national title, I don't think he's making the list for reasons why. And I'm not gonna I did enough research so I could do this podcast, but I'm not gonna sit here and act like I'm the biggest expert in the world on Baron Morton and Texas Tech's passing attack and whatnot. But and some of this is because we live in the bubble, we all know that Julian Sayin is going to have to do something at some point for Ohio State to win a national title, right? He essentially did it in the Big Ten championship game. It's not his fault that Jaden Fielding missed the field goal. No, it is his fault that he didn't convert on the 3 downs before they had to kick a field goal, but he did his part in getting them down there. I don't think if the game comes down to whether or not Baron Morton can outplay the quarterback on the other sideline, he has the ability to do that. I think Texas Tech knows he doesn't have the ability to do that. They are not in the college football playoff because of their quarterback play. They're in it's almost, to put this in Ohio State terms, it's very Kyle McCord-ish, where at the end of the day, Kyle McCord only lost 1 game as a starter here. But do we say that with the tone of, man, Kyle McCord was awesome here. He only lost 1 game as Ohio State starting quarterback? Or do we say, I cannot believe they only lost one game with Kyle McCord as the starting quarterback here?
And he did lose
Sometimes
the
that's
game.
the phone. So. Sure. So did CJ Stroud and so did Kyle, and so did Will Howard. Well, that's if we're gauging by whether or not you win the game, there's only 2 quarterbacks that Ryan Day's had who have won that game. I think he is a solid quarterback. He's not elevating Texas Tech's offense. He is not the reason Texas Tech is in the position they are in right now. And I think that is where we ended up landing with Kyle McCord, and we asked ourselves, was that enough? And clearly, no, it was not enough because they did not bring him back. And some of that was obviously his choice and what he decided to do with his career. But they didn't think he could get them over the top. They thought Will Howard could, and he did. They thought CJ Stroud could, and he could. The defense failed him. And I guess we'll find out with Julian soon. But I look at Baron Morton with Texas Tech in the same vein that I looked at Kyle McCord at Ohio State. Good quarterback, but like, I don't know, like, I don't think it vastly changes if he has to miss. I don't want to say that either because now we're putting injuries out there in the world. But it's just, I don't know. I don't want him. I'd rather if you ask me, I could have any of these quarterbacks. He would be the last one I would pick, and so that's why he's number 8 for me. That's a lot of time spent on Texas Tech starting quarterback. Let's move on to number 7. Brennan looks so uninterested in the conversation about. You guys can't see Brennan, but he's like, "Why are we talking about this that long?" And now we move on to Carson Beck. Number 7 on the list, Carson Beck this year, 3,175 yards, 26 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He is the only player on this list who has double-digit interceptions heading into the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff. His 74.5 completion percentage led the ACC, and it was second in the country behind another quarterback we're going to talk about later on this list. He also had 42 carries for 33 yards and 1 touchdown this year. Carson Beck, Stefan, Ohio State, you are saying, is playing the 7th best quarterback left in the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So we talked about Morton. He played, what was it, 11? How many games did he play in this year? He played in 11 games. If Carson Beck played in 11 games this year, and let's say you conveniently remove the Louisville game, he's actually got pretty similar numbers. He would have only 6 interceptions because he threw 4 in that game against Louisville, and I think that's what it is with Carson Beck is that he doesn't take enough chances, right? And I'll go back to big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays. Like, both percentages are pretty low for him. It's very quick passing game and easy passes and things like that for Miami's offense. But when he makes mistakes, they come in bunches, and that has to concern you a little bit. But when he doesn't make mistakes, he plays pretty well, right? So it's kind of like this roller coaster, and if he could consistently be something in the middle, maybe you would think of him a little bit higher. Maybe he would be higher on this list. But that's always in the back of your head that there could be this real, stinker of a game. And when you look at Ohio State's defense and what they've done, I think you're looking at this game here in Dallas in a couple of days and saying that could be a real stinker if Ohio State, can do some things to confuse him and make life difficult for him. So, yeah, it's tough to really go all in on Carson Beck just because of the highs and the lows that come with his level of play. That said, he's a guy who's kind of been around, played in some big games. I don't know if Notre Dame would have lost to Georgia had he been healthy last year. I think it would have been a better game than Gunnar Stockton kind of getting thrown into the fire. I think it would have maybe looked a little bit different, and maybe Georgia could have approached things a little bit differently. So there is an element of like, been there, done that. Is that a place that I think has put the right things around him to kind of suit his style of play? I think he's largely been good for Miami this year. You kind of take out that Louisville game a little bit. So, I feel like I'm talking worse about Carson Beck while ranking him higher than Morton. So I just think that's kind of that's the trouble. That's the difficulty of talking about Carson Beck, because the highs can look pretty good. And that's why I have him over Morton, because when it's good, it's good. But the reason he's not kind of in the conversation of the top 5 or 6 is just because it's in the back of your head that something bad could happen when he's out there.
What do we think of that? Because he's the oldest quarterback left in this field, right? My graduating class, here's where all the quarterbacks are. Baron Morton was 2021. Trinidad James is 2021. Gunnar Stockton and Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson are all 2022. Dante Moore is 23. Julian Sayin, who's the youngest quarterback of this bunch, he's 2024. Carson Beck 2020. And so it's good to see we're moving away from the old man quarterback in college football and getting back. Nature is healing. No more 6-year guys and 7-year guys playing college football anymore. We're getting back to how things are supposed to be here. But Stefan, the way we're talking about Carson Beck is the way I think we should be talking about Julian Sayin, where it's, man, the ceiling is there. The ceiling is why he's higher than Baron Morton on your list. But that floor is just so chaotic and so detrimental that he taps out at number 7 on our list. Yeah. What does that say about Carson Beck? He's the most experienced quarterback on this list, and yet we're talking about him as if he's about to make start number 14 on Wednesday.
Yeah, and that's maybe the irritating part about his development is that it's struggled to get to a point of consistency. And that, like you said, like that's the reason he's at 7 and Julian Sayin is going to be 1, 2, or 3, the absolute lowest, like number 3 on these lists. That's kind of the irritating part, and why, because you're like Carson Beck was. We joke about John Mateer being the September Heisman. Carson Beck was in October looking like he might be a Heisman guy, right? Like the odds were heavily in his favor, and then he did the thing that you kind of always knew was going to happen. You're kind of left, banging your head into a wall, wondering, how the hell something like that happens for a guy that has shown you how good he can be at times. So the experience thing is interesting too, because you look at the last few years. Will Howard wins the national championship last year. J.J. McCarthy the year before that. Was it Stetson Bennett in 22?
No, it was Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
No, won the national championship. Yeah, Stetson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we've had a string of like decently experienced guys doing it, but also all 3 of those guys were probably on the best, all around team that year, right? Michigan in 23, Georgia in 22, Ohio State in 24. So it's like, it's a little bit of give and take. So if you're buying the trend of, veteran quarterbacks lead teams to titles, I could see why maybe you talk yourself into Carson Beck. But if you look at it and say, well, they were also on the best teams, that's why you maybe talk yourself out of Carson Beck. So I could see why someone would maybe buy into Carson Beck a little bit in this playoff. But getting the draw of Ohio State's defense kind of a tough draw for him.
Gillis, JJ is a first rounder, so I don't know if we can include him in this, regardless of what he's currently doing with Minnesota. They did take him in the first round of the NFL draft. Stetson Bennett wasn't a first round draft pick. Will Howard wasn't a first round draft pick, and I don't think Carson Beck. There was a time heading into the 2024 season where people thought he might be a first rounder. He is not going to be that. And to Stefan's point of, if you got an old guy, but you got a bunch of talent around him, it can be a recipe for a national championship. So who would you rather have? Carson Beck 2025, Will Howard 2024, or Stetson Bennett 2022, excuse me.
Oh God, that's a good question. Because I definitely went Howard over Beck. I think I don't want to say that as like a whoa, like I can't believe that. I think it's close. I would probably put Stetson last, frankly. Because I just think those defenses were the engine of that team. And, I think there was, you have Brock Bowers, you have a weapon like that. Like you have a run game, you've been able to move the ball. And I think if you had to rank those 3, you would probably put Stetson 3, Beck 2, Howard 1. But I think that's an interesting question. That's probably the way I'd go with it. But because I just think 2025 Miami is kind of just an encapsulation of Carson Beck. Carson Beck has thrown 10 picks this year, and 6 of them have come in their 2 losses. Through 4 picks against Louisville, through 2 picks against SMU. That's pretty clear. Like Matthew in our chat, he said that Beck will throw a pick trying to be a hero. I don't know if it's that. Like this, I think Matthew maybe being a little bit too nice to him. I don't think he's running around trying to make a play. Oh no, he just threw it up and it got picked. Oh, it was 3rd and 8 and he just chucked it. I don't know. I just think he might make a throw that makes you just go, what? What is that? What is he doing? Who did he look at? Was he trying to hit was he trying to hit Sonny Styles in the chest? Like that, like he might have one of those, and he does that, and that's the problem. But like, I pulled up his game log because I'm curious. 20 of 30, so a 66.67777 completion percentage, 205 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no picks. If I tell you that is Stetson Bennett, if I tell you that is Carson Beck's line on New Year's Eve and it's 11:30, do you feel better, worse, or the same about Miami's chances of pulling the upset? So again, that's 205 yards passing, 2 passing touchdowns, no picks, and a 66.7% completion percentage.
Same.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. Like, him throwing picks is not – I don't think Ohio State's going to beat Miami if that's what I end up picking, because Carson Beck throws interceptions. If he throws interceptions – his interceptions have constantly, in the times I've watched Miami, been more of the cherry on top of what was already going to be a Miami loss than the reason why Miami lost the football game. Because he threw the 4 picks against Louisville, but it was sort of like – but that's like overkill. Right? Like 4 picks is overkill. That's what you do in the video game when you're playing on all Madden and you're just trying to fit stuff in windows you don't see. The other game is where he had 2, you say 2 picks in the other loss. That's a little more realistic, where it's just like, all right, things happen in the flow of the game. But I wouldn't say that it is the only reason Miami lost 2 games this year. So it's more of it's going to happen. But it doesn't mean they have to lose because it happened. So it's no different than Will Howard, right? Will Howard threw some picks last year against Penn State, and against Michigan was a little different. He might not have been in the building. But against Penn State, he threw a pick 6, but did it end up costing Ohio State? No, it's not. And if they would have lost, I don't know if that would have been a reason why. It'd have been when you start piling up mistakes is when it becomes an issue.
Steph?
Yeah, probably the same. It's a cop-out answer, but like I would need to know which version of Ohio State's offense showed up. If the Ohio State offense that showed up, against Indiana shows up, then yeah, two touchdowns can certainly be enough with no interceptions. But even if the Ohio State offense from like the Washington game shows up, I think that's a stat line that could win it. But yeah, it probably makes me feel the same.
I don't know. It's Carson Beck, man. Let's move on to number 6. Oh, okay. Trinidad James. 6 for the group. And then there's Gillis. Put them up there. A number 4 on this list. Trinidad James this year, 3,298 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, 66.6 completion percentage. He also read it 124 times for 506 yards and 8 touchdowns. That's one of 2 quarterbacks on this list who have run it at least 100 times this year. I mean, I'm assuming that Stefan has him at number 6 for the same reasons that I have him at number 6, and the same reason that the Texers have him at number 6. So I guess, Gillis, the floor is yours. Why is Trinidad Chambers the number 4 quarterback in the college football playoff for you?
I just kind of like him. I think the running ability is there. I am maybe obviously compared to everybody else, I'm too much of a sucker for running quarterbacks. It's for me, it's like 6'7" guys that can shoot threes in the NBA. It's mobile quarterbacks. It's dudes who hit for power in the MLB.
Shooting threes in the NBA.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
maybe like 6'9", maybe like 6'9", 6'10". You give me like a big boy that could shoot like a 3-and-D type. I have a weakness for that, and I have a weakness for a dude who can get away and run the ball a little bit. You look at his game logs. Like, obviously, college football does this very stupid thing where they take sacks into account. Still had 506 rushing yards this year with 8 touchdowns. I think maybe underrated as a passer. I think a lot of people just kind of look at him and they're like, oh, it was Lane. Oh, it was, the offense that he was in and this and that and the other. Per PFF, he's the 4th highest rated quarterback left. He's behind Julian, Dante Moore, Fernando Mendoza in that order. There is a gap between those 3, and there is kind of a clump of 3 there with Chambliss, Simpson, and Stockton in terms of those rankings. But yeah, I don't know. I've watched Chambliss play. I watched the Egg Bowl. Thought he played really well. Like, you look at the stats, and I know this isn't a statistical thing. You're not just saying who has the most passing yards, him. Who has the second most passing yards, him. But I don't know. I especially when you kind of take into account that he didn't really play at the beginning of the year. I think he threw like less than 10 passes in their first couple of games. They let him go in middle of September, somewhere around there. And then he just kind of ran off to the races with it against a really good Oklahoma defense. Threw for over 300 yards. He had 50 yards rushing, like a Georgia defense that I think had them outmanned a little bit. He still threw for 263, had 42 yards rushing. Like, he's been able to move the ball against some really good defenses. And, that was part of the reason why I asked the question about Morton and talent is, I am curious, like kind of maybe, what, I guess maybe what he's working with on the outside compared to some of these other guys and some of these other receivers. Like, you go look at some of those like receivers that he's got. It's very much a group effort, and I think he is lifting them up more than they are lifting him up. So I mean, it's not crazy in terms of where I have him ranked, but I do think Chambliss is maybe a little bit better than people think.
Stefan, is Gillis crazy?
I don't think he's crazy. I like Trinidad Chambliss. I think his story is really cool. I mean, coming from Ferris State, not even being the starter to, open the season for Ole Miss, and now, he's a guy who's. I know they beat Tulane to get to the quarterfinals, but also he was pretty good throughout the season as a starter, and I think they were one of the no doubt playoff teams with what they did this season. I struggle just because. The system is just so good for quarterbacks, right? Like Ole Miss, I think you see Lane Kiffin, you see the clips of some of the deep shots they take. That's not really what their offense is, right? Like, remember the numbers Quinshawn put up before he came at Ohio State? Like, they're a team that's always had, or a system with Lane Kiffin that's always had a good rushing attack with a good kind of quick, short passing game to kind of complement it. And, his numbers aren't far off what Jackson Dart's numbers were the first year he started under Lane Kiffin. Matt Corral, his first year at Ole Miss was pretty rough. His first year with Lane Kiffin, he had better numbers than Trinidad. So, I don't want to make that comparison because Corral had been at Ole Miss a little bit before he, got with Lane Kiffin. So I'll look just simply at Jackson Dart. It just feels very similar to me. And Dart last season took a step forward and was really good and turned out being, a first round pick. If Chambliss had another year and he was at Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin, or if he gets another year and he goes to LSU with Lane Kiffin, I think we'll see him, probably produce at the level of a Jackson Dart. I don't know if he's the NFL prospect that Jackson Dart is, but I think he's a cool story. I don't want to bash him too much, and I think he's pretty firmly at number 6 for me. I just think that he specifically is in a system where like his skill set works perfectly, and he's kind of the guy where, Steven, if I were to take your example of plop him into Ohio State, plop him into Indiana, plop him into all these other teams in college football playoff, I don't know if he necessarily amplifies them. If I get him and Lane Kiffin for that offense, maybe they do still compete for national championship like Ohio State. I don't want to think about Lane Kiffin coaching at Ohio State. I'm sure none of our listeners here want to think about that because of the head case that it would be. But I think he's an interesting case study. I always want to be careful with saying more guys deserve more eligibility. If Trinidad Chambliss can come back to college football one more year, I will be happy because I like watching him play. And I don't think we're going to watch him play a ton in the NFL. So watching him play at the collegiate level is fun. But I think there's a bit of a system thing for me here that worries me about, or I guess gives me pause about ranking him higher than some of the other guys we have on here.
I think he is better than the 2 guys I have below him. Just like flat out. They are better. He's a better quarterback than the 2 guys I have below him. My problem with him is, and you touched on it, Stefan, 40.6% of his passes are short passes because that's their offense, right? They feed it to a workhorse back. Kawan Lacey had 273 carries so far this year, and they're not done playing football, right? If they somehow upset Georgia, this kid might have over 300 carries this year, right? It's when your job as a quarterback is to essentially keep a defense honest with a few short passes here or there, but a lot of what you do is through the run game. It's hard for me to honor that higher than anything else because it is a quarterback-friendly system. But I don't think it's a quarterback-friendly system in terms of like, we're here to turn you into a first-round draft pick. I think Jackson Dart just had some traits that Brian Daboll loved and got the coach for 10 games before he got fired. It's quarterback-friendly in terms of his numbers are never going to look that terrible, right? Like, he's never going to throw 12 picks. He's never going to – the QBR being 86.3. Okay, it's not going to be crazy lower than that. The level of efficiency is always going to be there. Even with like 66.6, it could probably be a little bit better than that. But Lane Kiffin doesn't put his quarterbacks in harm's way or ask them to do very much. What's funny? What?
Somebody in a chat, I'd take Biff at Ohio State before Lane. That was that's really funny.
I would Lane Kiffin as like the OC here, I think might be the last straw for Ryan Day. He just retires. He's like, I'm not dealing with this. I cannot believe I hired this. But yeah, that's all. It's he's asked to do so little. It's almost as if imagine the Julian Sayin Texas game, but there was not a next step. Like, that's just what they did with Julian Sayin for the rest of the year, right? Then there's a way we would have talked about Julian for the rest of this year of what they did against Texas with him. It's just what he was for every single game. And I feel like that's what Lane Kiffin's quarterbacks are a lot of times, is what Julian Sayin was against Texas. Okay, that's the first diverging of the pack. And of course, it's Gillis doing it with the plucky guy from Ole Miss. Actually, you know what? You know who I think would really have a good time with Trinidad James, which is why it's not shocking that Andrew had it at number 4. I think Oregon, with how they play offense, I think would be a good spot for him. Where it's not Dante Moore's a little bit different because that's a dude with an NFL arm. But if you look at the 2 quarterbacks he had before that, they weren't asking him to do very much. Bo Nix just turned out to be pretty awesome in the NFL. Trinidad James, 20.4% of the 5th place votes, 19% of the 6th place votes, 16% of the 7th place votes. That's where most of his votes came into play. On to number 5. Okay. So I have him the highest. Stefan is with the Texans at number 5, and Gillis, you have him at number 6 on your list. Stefan, I want to start with you because you are clearly a man after the Texans' own heart. Number 5, he's the top man in the bottom 4 for you. Why?
Yeah, Georgia believer, Stephen Means. Look at that. Going after Gunnar Stockton. I was not huge on Gunnar Stockton going into this season. He's been better than I thought. And I've actually been kind of impressed with him. I just think the 4 guys ahead of him are just better. But he's actually been pretty decent. He found himself probably undeservingly with the same odds as Julian Sayin to win the Heisman after the Big Ten title game. And there was some concern, I think, among the 3 of us that are they really going to send Gunnar Stockton to New York instead of Julian Sayin? Thankfully, that did not happen. But I think in a similar way to how we talked about Trinidad James, I think he's kind of fit what Georgia has asked him to do this season. But I do feel like with his traits, there's kind of still another step with him that maybe he can develop into. But he's kind of done what Georgia has asked him to do this year. It's if we were to have a debate of like Trinidad James and Gunnar Stockton, you would maybe even be able to convince me to swap the 2. Going back to the stats I like to use. Big time throw percentage, just he's right there with Carson Beck. They don't ask him to do a ton. He's a little higher in turnover worthy plays though, which concerns me a bit. Right, I need you to be, if you're going to be high on one, then I need you to probably be pretty high on the other. So that gives me a little bit of concern. But he's done what Georgia's asked him to do this year. I think he's got better as the season has gone on, which if you're a Georgia fan probably excites you for what he can do in the college football playoff. Him and Trinidad James for me are 2 very level guys. But let's see. I'm interested to see what he looks like. Ole Miss's defense is not good, so I think he'll probably. I mean, they put up 40 points on Ole Miss earlier this year, so it's like not going to be a huge test. I'm interested to see what he does against Ohio State's defense, which is obviously a tough test for anyone. But if those two teams meet up, or if Ohio State were to get upset, I'd be interested to see what he does against Miami's defense because I think that's also a pretty good unit. But I've come around on Gunnar Stockton more than I thought I was going to this season.
Gillis, why so low? Oh, actually, here's how I want to preference that, because then I can lead into how I respond to it. Did him playing in the college football playoff last year provide an impression that you can't get out of your head?
So
And now that's how you view him.
I was about to say that because I don't think so. I think I remember Bet getting hurt, and I remember reading some stuff from Georgia, like from Georgia writers saying people in the building believe that Stockton's actually better. This is actually kind of a unique move that they can put Stockton ahead of him. Hey, maybe this is better. Maybe he can play Notre Dame and get some rolling and blah, 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 blah. And I remember thinking like, okay, I'm kind of excited to see what this guy can do now. And I wasn't all that impressed. Now, Notre Dame had a very good defense last year, but I didn't necessarily leave that game thinking, wow, this dude at least showed promise, right? Or at least like, wow, this looks different. I remember one of their touchdowns, there was a dude wide open. Like it was one of those things where he didn't really do anything to impress me. I think this year, I think he's been solid. Like I think he has been better than I thought he was going to be. But I think there are I should say, I think the simplest way to put it is when I'm looking at my top 5, there are special things that each one of those guys can do that I don't think Gunnar Stockton can do. Like, even if you want to say Trinidad Chambliss is an RPO merchant and, they run, the bubble offense and it's quick and it's fast and he's not asked to do a lot and blah, blah, blah. He can still run in a manner that I think is different than Gunnar. And I know Gunnar Stockton does run. You look at his numbers. He had 13 carries in the SEC title game. He does run the ball. I think it's different with Chambliss. I think, there are other guys that you look at and obviously we haven't named them yet. So like, Ty Simpson, I think he makes NFL throws that I just don't see Gunnar Stockton make. So there's a level to this where I see Ryan Day talk about it all the time. What do you do that's special? What is your special trait? What is your thing that separates you? I don't know if Gunnar Stockton has a, whoa, look at that trait. Like for Julian, we've talked about it all year. It's accuracy. What is that for Gunnar? I don't know. And I'm not saying that to poo-poo him. I obviously have him, 2 people, or I still have 2 people below him. So I still think he's solid, but I'm not impressed to a level of saying, if this guy was the quarterback at Indiana's not having the success that they did. I don't think Oregon is. I don't think, Ole Miss is. I'm not all that sold on a unique trait and a unique characteristic.
I think if Gunnar Stockton was at Alabama, he might have won the Heisman Trophy. You're asking what he does special. Can being a dude when it's time to be a dude be special? Because you look at it. Go ahead.
I want to push back on what you just said there. If Gunnar Stockton was on a team with no run game and probably just as good, maybe slightly better weapons, you think he'd be that much better?
Yes, I would, because he can run. That's part of the problem is Ty Simpson can't run. And sometimes
I don't think Ty Simpson's the reason Alabama can't run.
No. But it's at least another variable that
he can help.
Yeah, he can help. Like this,
I think we're giving him too much credit.
I stopped listening. The reason I asked Gillis the question because I was there. I think for most of this year, I was like, oh, he didn't look good last year, so I'm just gonna throw it away. And then I sat down and started preparing for this, and his raw numbers, okay, fine. 2,691 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 70.7 completion percentage, 116 rushes this year for 442 yards, and 8 touchdowns ain't bad, especially when 47 of those runs are scrambles. He's running, and he's a dude. Did you know in the fourth quarter, he's completing 87.5% of his passes for 386 yards and 3 touchdowns this year? You're talking about Trinidad Chambliss. Andrew, I mean, he outplayed him. He was 12 of 12 in the second half, 135 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's why they won the game. I mean, Fernando Mendoza and Julian Sayin have been awesome this year. Neither one of them have a game against a playoff opponent where they went 12 of 12 for 135 yards and 3 touchdowns in the second half to cap off a comeback win. He had 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter against Texas. Julian Sayin threw 1 touchdown against Texas. He had a comeback win against Tennessee. Like, I don't know, man. Sure, he does not look like the dude who, from a physical standpoint, looks the part in a way that I think it sounds like we're all going to have a consensus top 3 here. I would not say he is as good at playing quarterback and as talented as those guys at playing quarterback. But I don't know, man. When you ask that dude to go win a game in the fourth quarter, he keeps showing us he can win a game in the fourth quarter. And that's special. I didn't know that until I started looking. I didn't realize he was doing that stuff. Like, there was a point this year when we thought Georgia might be dead. And he is, I'm not going to say single-handedly. They got a lot of talent out there, but he is clearly driving the bus in a way that, I don't know, how many of those games would they have lost if Carson Beck was still their quarterback? So I don't know. I said a crazy thing to reel people in so they could actually hear it. You know, the media thing where you say the craziest thing in the world and you bring it back in with actual. I think his special trait is like he shows up in the fourth quarter and gets the job done against quality football teams. Was Tennessee overrated this year? Yes, but they were a top 25 team for a while in the college football playoff rankings. Ole Miss is in the field. He's beaten Alabama twice. Well, no, once. I think they lost the first time. But he beat Alabama in the SEC championship game, but he shows up. And I can't say the same about some of these other quarterbacks, especially if the conversation comes down to him and a dude he beat straight up, and that's Trinidad Chambliss, and that's Ty Simpson. He beat those guys straight up. So, yeah, I think there's a gap between 1, 2, and 3, and then the rest of the list. But I don't think it's that crazy to suggest that a dude who has led comeback win after comeback win and keeps showing up at the moments that, quite frankly, we evaluate quarterbacks on, he shows up. The proof is Julian Sayin, and this is Julian Sayin led a drive to go tie the game. Gunnar Stockton, on multiple occasions, led drives to win the football game and executed it. That's got to count for something.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely matters. I did, just to kind of poo-poo your point, I went and did some research. That completion percentage definitely helped by his 3 for 3 passing in that fourth quarter against Georgia Tech, where they won like 16-9 against a bad Georgia Tech defense.
Did he or did he not complete all his passes?
He did. And now I have to be a Gunnar Stockton hater, even though I have him in my top 5, just so I can battle with Steven here. But no, I do think, back to the question you asked Gillis, like, I think there is an element of, and this is kind of the result of what college football is that Gunnar Stockton got thrown into the fire last year, was not good. And I think your 2025 college football brain immediately goes, well, he's going to transfer out and they're going to get someone new because he's obviously not good enough. And like, props to Georgia, like they've stuck with him and he's kind of proven them right. And on top of that, I think if you're Georgia specifically, it could have been easy to go the other way because Carson Beck was like not inspiring and they stuck with him and he came back and he wasn't particularly inspiring again. So like that might have easily clicked to your brain of like, hey, we can't afford to do that again. If a guy doesn't look good, we got to move on. And they stuck with him. Mm-hmm. I think he's coming back next season. If I'm not mistaken, I think there's more eligibility there. Like, would not surprise me if he had this like Gunnar Stockton arc where it's just like going to the NFL is not really something that he needs to rush and pursue. Can come back, have another year at Georgia. And it's like all of a sudden it's late December, early January next season. It's like you're banging your head into the wall because you're just like, this guy's not actually that good, but it's like he's winning games and he's leading them to title contention. All right. I think we got to that point with Stetson Bennett where like by the end of his career, it's like, yeah, I guess he's a Heisman finalist. I guess he's doing things to have this team competing for a national championship. And if he was thrown into USC and had to replace Caleb Williams, no, they would not have been any better. But that's kind of what Georgia needed, and he gave him that. It's enough to win a national championship. I think Gunnar Stockton kind of fills that mold. And in the same way that Trinidad Chambliss is a top 6 quarterback in this conversation that we're having because he's gone into the system and done what they've asked him to do, like, Gunner's doing that at Georgia, and that's how Georgia wins national championships. Now, I think their defense has obviously taken a step back from those peak Georgia years, Okay, well, Georgia just won the SEC and they're the 3 seed in the playoff. So you're giving him worse defenses that Stetson Bennett had. And sure, he's not getting them into the same spot where they're like dominating and cruising to a national championship, but he's got them in a spot in this new format where they're still one of the better teams in the field.
You guys know, I love narratives. I love it. I like good narratives, not making up dumb stuff. I think Ohio State, Georgia, and Fiesta Bowl is just such an intriguing thing because both of these teams got away from the type of quarterback that they win with for a little bit there. And yeah, Ohio State ended up winning a national championship with one, but think about the last two. Like Jake Fromm is who Kirby Smart got to a national championship game with. Stetson Bennett is the guy he won back-to-back national championships with. Those are not starting NFL caliber quarterbacks. If we're just going strictly off NFL talent, Carson Beck's probably the best quarterback he's had as a starter. This is the man who chose Jake Fromm over Justin Fields a long time ago. You know, same Justin Fields who was, regardless of what he's done now, he was a first-round draft pick coming out of college and a Heisman Trophy quarterback. And he chose Jake Fromm over that. This is the guy who beat C.J. Stroud with Stetson Bennett. It's just like how with Ohio State, there's this expectation of the quarterback should be a Heisman Trophy caliber player, first-round draft pick. I don't think that's the requirement at Georgia. You just need a dude who can be a dude when it's time to be a dude. And that's Jake Fromm had his moments in 2017. He kind of regressed, obviously, in the years that followed that. Stetson Bennett had plenty of moments in 21 and 22 when he was their starting quarterback, so much so that he was a Heisman Trophy finalist in 2022. Weaker field outside of Caleb and CJ, but still he was a Heisman Trophy finalist. And now here you got Gunnar Stockton. Do I think Gunnar Stockton's going to be a 10-year starting quarterback for an NFL franchise one day? Probably not, right? He'll probably do what Stetson's doing. Stetson's the backup for the Los Angeles Rams right now. And he'll probably have a good career and maybe start a couple of games in his career. Do I think Julian Sayin might be a top 5 draft pick in 18 months? Of course I do. You guys think that there's a good chance that depending on how things work out, if he's the first quarterback taken off the board, it wouldn't shock us completely. But that's how Ohio State does things, and that's how Georgia does things. And Gunnar Stockton is doing what Georgia quarterbacks under Kirby Smart are supposed to do, and that's winning football games, even if it looks god ugly for 3 quarters, and then he turns into a dude for the 4th quarter. So I got a lot of respect for Gunnar Stockton. I think he's the best of the – they're not really NFL quarterbacks that Kirby Smart has had, and I would love to see him and Julian Sayin and Phoenix. More importantly, I would love to go to the Camelback Resort. So I don't know, man. People just need to do their jobs here. And that's both in Athens and in Columbus. Let's move on to number 4. Oh, man. Okay, Stefan, you and the Texers alike once again. Why is Ty Simpson number 4 for you?
Yeah, me and the Texans have been lockstep to this point. I'm interested to see what happens in the top 3. Well, here I am having to defend Alabama as they prepare to face Indiana in the Rose Bowl. So I could put on my Indiana alum glasses for a second. The only thing that scares me about Indiana in this Rose Bowl is Ty Simpson. I think that he has been Alabama's only hope, right? And I think he's maybe in a similar mold to Gunnar Stockton, just in terms of the conversation of like, you were ready for a premier program to kind of give up on this guy. Even after a coaching change, they stuck with him, and he's been there with Kalen DeBoer, and he's starting to look. He's not playing to like Mike Penix level, not even close to that, but I think he's starting to look kind of what you would expect from a Kalen DeBoer coach quarterback. And I think his development has been impressive, and I think what he's been asked to do has been like, if we were to rank these quarterbacks in terms of like they have to show up for their team to win a national championship, I think you could make the case for him to number 1, just because that running game, they're so one-dimensional in terms of their offense. And I don't think their weapons are as good as maybe they look on paper. I think part of that is Ryan Williams not necessarily being the guy that, for lack of a better term, like deserves to be on a video game cover, or he hasn't been that this year. So I don't think what he has around him is not like, oh, Alabama recruits at the highest level and everything around him is amazing. Like, that's not exactly what it is. Alabama struggling to run the ball is like a foreign concept to me. Like, we've been around Mark Ingram a lot the last few years with him being on Big Noon and things of that nature. Like, to have him talking on Big Noon and then to turn on an Alabama game and it's like, this is Alabama's offense. It's kind of perplexing. And I think what he's been able to do to get them to this point, by the way, am I allowed to call it, like, obviously not in print, not in, I guess, technical terms because there's copyright issues, but like on the pod, am I allowed to say Elite Eight? Like, can I call it Elite Eight, Final Four, now that we have 12 teams in the college football playoff? Or is Buckeye Talk cool with that?
I mean, this is a pod. You can do whatever you want.
I don't know, Brennan. What are the rules?
He's got Bama in the Elite Eight.
I think
he's got Bama playing in the Elite Eight, and I think he's the reason why Bama's in the Elite Eight. I thought what he did, I know John Mateer made some mistakes, which is why I had him at number 12 in terms of my quarterbacks in the college football playoff rankings. John Mateer made some mistakes to help Alabama get back into that game, but you got to take advantage of it. And I thought Ty Simpson did that. I thought he played really well in that game against Bama. I know one of our Buckeye Ryan pointed out in the chat that he looked incompetent against Georgia, and that's a bad or not as great Georgia defense. So you're right. I'll concede that. He did not look good in the SEC championship game. But I feel like a lot of times when it's been him or nothing for Alabama, he's delivered. I think he might end up also being a pretty decent quarterback in the NFL. I'm not opposed to that idea either. I think he's got some of those traits that gets, NFL GMs and coaches excited. He's also got some traits that get NFL GMs and coaches fired. But I don't know. I like Ty Simpson. I mean, you guys have him in your top 5, so it's like you guys obviously don't hate him. I think there's just guys you have ahead of him. But I feel like if not for the way he's played this year, I don't think Bama is in the Elite Eight. And Bama's a fixture in the Elite Eight recently because their basketball team is better than their football team now. So for the football team to make it into the Elite Eight, pretty impressive for plucky little Alabama.
Steven, who did you have 4? You had Gunner 4?
Gunner.
What was there any thought to you guys of not having the top 3 as to what we all had? Like, was there was Gunner close for you? And okay, because
I'm going to be honest. I think Diego Pavia probably deserved to be in the top 4 of the Heisman conversation. I don't think he's one of the 3 best quarterbacks because I think the 3 best quarterbacks in college football are in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's not close.
Yeah.
For me.
And I would
those 2
and I would be open to hearing I'd be open to hearing where Jada Maeva is in this conversation as well.
Interesting.
That's what I was getting ready to say. You said 3. You can go a little. I get it. Like we make fun of Lincoln Riley a lot at cleveland.com, but like one thing we can't make fun of is the way he develops quarterbacks. You can make a case that they have the 4 best quarterbacks in college football. It's just one of them is on a team that's not necessarily at the same level as the other teams are. But I don't know. Jaden Maeva was so good that his wide receiver wasn't the best wide receiver in the Big Ten, but he was the best wide receiver in the country because that makes all the sense in the world. But no, Gillis, for me, I didn't even consider those 3 when I was talking about the other 5 because they were going to be their own conversation of what I think it is, but also what like realistically you could have it be based on the fact that some of these guys have gone head to head against each other.
Yeah, I and you're right. Like if Damon Williams is in, not to go off too far, of course, if Damon Williams is in this, he's not 8 for me. He's probably not 7 for me. What's the kid's name at Purdue? Max Brown. Jimmy would have him 2nd. There'd be we were watching that game, watching him make some.
Jimmy's about to call you Ryan Brown.
Oh, Ryan Brown. I apologize. You guys love the kid at Minnesota. Yeah, look, Big Ten's got really good quarterback play. But the thing with Simpson and Chambliss versus Simpson was really hard for me. It was kind of interchangeable with 4 and 5. The thing that I looked at with Simpson, I think sometimes you almost have to like look at it from a bigger picture lens. One of the things that I think is interesting is when sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. When people who like cover the NFL or people who look at NFL draft stuff, they start to evaluate quarterback play. We saw this with Arvell Reese, right? How many times did people that, you see NFL draft, whatever on Twitter say like, my God, look at Arvell Reese. He's this and he's that. Like Dane Brugler was talking about him being maybe the best overall prospect in the draft at one point. And it gives you some healthy perspective. And I think there are certain things with Ty Simpson where you look at and you say, whoa, that's an NFL throw. And you start to see some of these cut ups of just hey, that's really impressive. That's really impressive. And I think, while there has maybe been some up and down there, I still think he's a really solid quarterback. To me, I had kind of a grouping. I had 1, 2, 3. I had 4, 5, and 6, and then I had 7 and 8. But I think you really started to kind of see a difference for me at 5 with Simpson. Now, again, we're not all that off course. Stefan had him 4, our texters had him 4, Steven and I had him 5. But I think this is where you start to see, okay, this is maybe something that can really impact a game, and this is maybe somebody who can go win you a football game.
Yeah, but I think our tones are very different with the rankings.
Okay.
Here. There's like a respect for Ty Simpson that Stefan is having with his 4. There's a respect that you're having with Ty Simpson with your 5, Gillis. And he's got the most big time throws to Stefan this thing. He's got 10 more. He's got 30 this year. The next closest is Dante Moore with 28, which we'll get into in a second. He also has the most turnover worthy plays this year. His numbers are the epitome of numbers don't lie, but they also don't always tell the full story, right? He's got 3,500 yards this year, which led the SEC. His 28 touchdowns led the SEC, but only 64.1 completion percentage. He's not a runner, 87 carries for 76 yards. He has done some things because Alabama has found themselves in some competitive 4-quarter games that should not have been competitive 4-quarter games. Is that a fair thing to say? Like, I don't know. You're in a 4-quarter game with South Carolina. You shouldn't be in a 4th-quarter game with South Carolina. You shouldn't be in a 4-quarter game. Missouri just lost to Houston. As of the time we're recording this podcast, the SEC has won 2 postseason games. One was against a G5 school, and the other one was against another SEC school. I think Alabama's fraud. And I think they've been scamming us at the same time. I think they're fraud and scam are on our list of scam or fraud. And I think his numbers are the epitome of that. Do I think he's got some talent? Yeah, I agree with you, Stefan. There's probably an NFL team out there who's going to take a flyer on him. And he might turn into something in the NFL. But he's not the problem, but I also don't think he's part of the solution. I think he's the Band-Aid over the problem that is Alabama, and that's that their roster is very, very flawed, and they are benefiting from the fact that they're in the SEC. So people don't look at them for the fraudulent roster that they actually are. Like Oklahoma probably should have wiped them off the field 2 weeks ago, but then John Mateer threw a pick 6 and it kind of flipped the momentum of how that game was going to go, which is why I think Indiana might do that to them. But I don't know, man. He's a good quarterback, but I don't believe in him. And I can't quite put my finger on for why I don't believe in him yet. So for me, it was the big 3, Gunnar Stockton, after a significant gap, decent gap, but not crazy gap. And then that's where like Ty Simpson and Trinidad Chambliss live. But I think he is, for me, he is much closer to Carson Beck and Baron Morton than he is to anybody in the big 3, like severely closer to where those guys are. And I get it, like Ryan Williams has not lived up to the hype, and the offense around him has not always helped him, but like he's not the solution. He's just more of a Band-Aid for me. So that's why he's number 5 on my list. I just don't believe in it. Okay, let's get to the big 3. Let's see what we do here.
Yeah. I figured we were all going to have him at 3.
Oh, I didn't. I thought you were going to have him at 1. I'm joking.
No, well, I do have a question.
I genuinely thought that maybe we'd be having a conversation with him and one of the quarterbacks, though. But we all have him at number 3. So go ahead, Gillis.
Here was my question, because I think he's 3 because just maybe the accomplishments of what he's done, and I think you definitely like there's certain traits that other guys have, specifically Julian and Fernando, where you're like that's also elite. It's there's a reason why he's 3. Do you guys think Dante Moore is the most talented of the 8 quarterbacks that we've discussed, or no?
If we were projecting on what they could potentially do in the college football playoff, he would be number 1 for me.
I agree with that. I think in terms of arm talent, ceiling, you pair the athletic, like you pair athleticism, you pair aren't like there have been throws that he's made this year that you just stop and go, oh my goodness. Like he's had some just darts down the field. And I think in terms of that, I think he's the most physically gifted, most physically talented. I think that's probably the best descriptor for him. But this isn't a beauty pageant. It's who you think is the best. And I think Dante, that's why I had Dante 3, but I do think like in terms of like the guy who maybe has like the highest ceiling of anybody in this group in college football and in the pro level, I think it's Dante Moore.
You want to know why he's number 3 for me? Because he hasn't done it.
I totally agree.
He literally hasn't done it. Because even they protected Julian Sayin against Texas. Okay, they didn't protect him against Penn State. That's a like-minded opponent. Okay, they did. They definitely didn't protect him against Michigan. In Indiana, I mean, Cignetti's never protected Fernando Mendoza, which is exactly why he ended up winning the Heisman Trophy, right? Like, unfortunately, the way Dante Moore's schedule went, the Penn State game doesn't matter. And the rest of their schedule wasn't. So we're just kind of working off idea with Dante Moore right now. But if you tell me, if Oregon wins the national championship, it's because Dante Moore turned into 2022 CJ Stroud for 4 games.
Yep.
And I also don't think that's unrealistic to expect, especially as his weapons get healthy.
Yeah, I think Dante Moore is awesome. I think where I have hesitations with him is just you're right. It does suck that the Penn State game kind of doesn't matter anymore. I mean, against Indiana, he completed 62% of his passes, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. He goes and plays Iowa, completes 62% of his passes, no touchdowns, 1 pick. Washington, he was 20-29, so that good completion percentage, 1 touchdown, no picks. Like, I don't know. Like, in the biggest moments, he hasn't been the star that I think we expect him to be. And that gives me a little bit of hesitation. So he's like one of those guys where you're right, Stephen. Like if Oregon wins, it's because of Dante Moore. But also, it would not surprise me if he is hyped up massively going into a game, whether it be against Texas Tech, who I predict Oregon to lose to, or Indiana, who has a great defense, or Ohio State, or Miami, or Georgia, who have I guess Georgia doesn't have a great defense. But let's say it's Ohio State, who has a great defense. Like, it would not surprise me if he kind of laid an egg in one of those games, and that gives me a little bit of pause with him. So, yeah, there is an idea of Dante Moore, and he's been really close to that idea in a lot of games, right? Like, he's had a few amazing games. I thought against USC, he was awesome. But then there's games where it's like they really need you to be the guy, and you weren't quite that. And that's the cool thing about this expanded playoff is that guys like Dante Moore now have opportunities over and over and over again to kind of have that moment. But I do hesitate because Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza, the 2 guys that we're going to have ahead of him, obviously have done it and have won those big games and when their team has needed them, they've delivered. Dante Moore, really close to that, just a little bit of hesitation. I feel like he is firmly in top 3. There is still a little bit of a gap between, I think, 1 and 2 and where he is at number 3.
He got 55% of the third place votes, which I think was just that's the texters echoing what we're saying in this moment. I think him and Dan Lanning are in the same spot as coaching quarterback. No, seriously, and I'm not saying that to be, but like seriously, think about it. Both of them have this thing where it's like, well, I beat Penn State, and it's like, yeah, like you know, what do you do with that? Like everybody who's good beats Penn State. It's like this. It's a participation trophy for a team that we think is elite. Yeah, but we make fun of Gillis a lot, but seriously, like, he's not off-brand to say like, "Hey, Dan Lanning in the next 5 years wins a national championship." He's at a short list of people who don't have a national championship where we would say, "Hey, in the next 5 years, this guy's going to win one," and we would say, "Yeah, I can wrap my head around that." But Dan Lanning has reached a point where he's got to go do it in games that matter. And that's games in December. Dante Moore is in a position now where he's got to go do it in games that matter because right now those two are like walking ideas of what they could be. And it's time to go actually start validating those feelings of some things. And I think that for them, that'll start on New Year's Day when they play Texas Tech, which I think is why that's such an intriguing game for both of those people.
Oh, yeah, that game is we're gonna have some really good quarterfinal games. I think last year we ended up with some. I mean, obviously the Rose Bowl was kind of a mess. I mean, Texas Arizona State was awesome. That was a really exciting game. What's the other one that I'm forgetting? Notre Dame, Georgia.
If you're forgetting them, they weren't that memorable.
Yeah, so maybe it was just one, but I think this year we're gonna have some fun ones. Alabama, Indiana's intriguing. Ohio State, Miami, intriguing. And I don't think they're going to be necessarily blowouts either. But I think Oregon, Texas Tech is really interesting because, like Stefan was pointed out, you're right. Like, you look at the numbers against Penn State, and I think you only have like 50 yards of total extra yardage through overtime. So his numbers definitely did get inflated a little bit by overtime, but they were still decent. The Indiana game, he had 2 picks. Indiana really kind of stifled them. Then that 2-game stretch is just interesting to me. They played Wisconsin. I remember that was a bye week. I was watching that game. It was 40-mile-an-hour winds, and it was like he's just not throwing the ball. The same thing at Iowa the following week. It was like pouring rain, and you want to see a scenario where it's, hey, Dante, go win us a football game, brother. Go spin it and go win. And I think he might get that chance against Texas Tech. And I think that there's a chance that we leave that game going, man, Oregon better be worried that dude is walking out the door to be a top 5 NFL draft pick. And I think that there's a chance where we leave that game going, I see it, but he needs to go back to Eugene for another season.
No, I think he should go pro. He's going to be a top 5 draft pick regardless of what happens. Go pro. You're going to be a top 5 draft pick. You know who doesn't have that problem of showing up when the lights get bright? Gunnar Stockton.
I do want to say, first of all, it would not surprise me if Dante was the first quarterback taken in this draft. Like, if we're talking sheer traits because of that athleticism, it would not surprise me. I want to, Gillis, you said something there at the start where you were talking about Dante that kind of caught my attention. I think if you combine athleticism with arm talent, he has the highest ceiling of the 3 quarterbacks that we're going to talk about here. I think if we're just talking about arm talent, I would consider taking Julian Sayin for Fernando Mendoza over him still. And both those guys have enough athleticism to where you can buy me time and I can spare you having less athleticism than Dante Moore because you have better arm talent than Dante Moore. And I would rather, because of the way Indiana plays, because of the way Ohio State plays, and frankly, even a little bit because of the way Oregon plays, I'd rather have the better arm talent, even if it means a little bit of a dip in athleticism.
So I'm going to guess that Julian Sayin is number 2. Okay.
Look at us in lockstep at the top 3.
I mean,
I thought there was going to be more disparity.
I thought there was going to be 2. I thought somebody might have had Julian 1.
No, I mean, they played each other. And it came down to they played each other in the game from the quarterback perspective. Came down to one guy making 1 or 2 more throws than the other guy.
I agree.
If we're just in that box, we know Julian Sayin, red zone, tight ends galore, all those different things. But if we're just sticking it strictly to how did Julian Sayin play in comparison to Fernando Mendoza, one made 1 or 2 more plays than the other one. And so as a result, one got the Heisman Trophy and every other possible award a quarterback can win. And the other one finished 4th in Heisman Trophy voting, and he's finishing 2nd on our list here. 3,323 yards, 31 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a new FBS record, 78.4 completion percentage. He is -2 on rushing yards. That's insane. This is the 3rd time Ohio State's had a quarterback finish negative in rushing yards. CJ Stroud did it in 2021. Kyle McCord did it in 2023. And now Julian Sayin did it in 2025. It's just funny. It's like your quarterback's either Will Howard and Justin Fields, or like they run galore and have like 10 rushing touchdowns, or they're this. Or so they don't run at all. And the only reason they have rushing stats is because sacks count and the rushing stat total, which is ridiculous. I have thoughts about Julian Sayin that I would like to save for the game preview pod. So I don't want to use them here, but I'll ask this. Is this Like these are 1 and 2. Like I don't know if we were to do this again on January 20th.
Mm-hmm.
Are Fernando Mendoza, which you can put him up on the screen now, Brennan. Look at me trying to produce the pod while also talking on the pod. This is the type of stuff Stephen A. Smith does. I'm not trying to do that. Does this flip if Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza meet again in Miami and Julian Sayin wins it? But also, more importantly, are these two 1 and 2 no matter what happens in the college football playoff?
No and no.
Okay.
I like you said with Dante. Who was the example that you used? Like if he goes on a who run in the playoff?
If he looks like CJ Stroud,
yeah, like if Dante
like
cranks it into gear, like if he finds another gear, like that can absolutely change things. I predicted Oregon to go to the national championship game, and like if something like that happens, then then absolutely. To answer your Fernando and Julian question, I would still say no, because what I don't want to be is like but did he win the game guy? Because then that means it opens the door to say, oh, well, Gunnar Stockton was simply better than CJ Stroud because his team won, right? Like in 2020.
Well, no, I'm saying if it plays out the way the last game played out, where it literally just came down to one quarterback playing. I'm not talking like Julian Sayin only threw 10 passes, but Ohio State won the game. I mean, like they are the fundamental reasons why they won the football game. And it's like
I would still
go ahead.
I was gonna say I would still say no, because even when Ohio State was driving, like before that final throw that Fernando made, that kind of clinched the game, before that kind of ended things and put it away. Like Jaden Fielding's walking onto the field to kick a field goal, which like should tie the game. At that moment in time, I still thought Fernando Mendoza had outplayed Julian Sayin, like up until that point, and Ohio State was about to tie the game. So I use that as an example to say like there's a little bit of wiggle room there to where I think a quarterback can still play better in certain circumstances, even if it's a close game. Look, it would not surprise me if Julian Sayin outplays Fernando Mendoza next time around. I think there's less room for this, but it would not surprise me if Julian outplays Fernando and Indiana wins. It would not really surprise me if Fernando outplays Julian and OSU just has so much offensively or defensively or whatever that they make a couple extra plays that are maybe independent of quarterback. So I don't want to lock that in just because I think back to Indianapolis, and even as Julian was leading his team down the field, and even as they did get stopped and it should have been a tie game with like 2.5 minutes left, I had thought like if you would have, we have to submit our MVP ballots for, who's the MVP if this team wins and that team wins. For Indiana, you had to do it with 5 minutes left. Indiana for me was Fernando. Ohio State for me was not Julian. It was Caden Curry. So I thought Fernando had just been the better guy that game. So I do want to leave that little wiggle room up there.
Two things on the ballot. If Fernando or if Julian had led a game-winning drive, you probably would have at least considered swapping him.
Right.
Yeah.
If they throw a goal line fade instead of kicking a field goal and Jeremiah Smith catches the ball, Julian Sayin's winning the MVP.
Well, it might even be Jeremiah Smith at that point.
Right.
Well, no, because like Jeremiah would not have had 144 yards and like 8. Because you got to remember, like 50 of his yards came on that Hail Mary at the end of the game, and Julian Sayin.
Yeah, but
if
you take out the Hail Mary and you put in like a 15-yard fade, then he ends up with like 115 and a touchdown.
Yeah, but Julian Sayin would have thrown touchdowns above Carnell and JJ that day.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, yeah, it's semantics. It's semantics. We don't like doing semantics. Well, Gillis likes doing semantics. We don't like doing semantics. You would have had a case.
Gillis likes to be truthful and evaluate all the facts.
I forgot to vote for the MVP thing because we were writing at the buzzer. But when the game ended, I was confident that the right guy was going to win MVP. So I was like, it's fine that I didn't vote on this thing. Yeah. Here's what I think is interesting and why I have Fernando number one. And I didn't even really debate changing who I had number one is. I think at their peaks, both Dante Moore and Julian Sayin can be better than Fernando Mendoza, right? Their ceilings. If I were to say all three ceilings, I think all three of them have really high ceilings. Maybe Fernando has the best ceiling. It would not surprise me if one of those other two had a better ceiling. I think we've seen Fernando closer to his ceiling because his team, number one, has led him, and two, his team has needed him at times to do that a bit more. I can't put Julian and Dante ahead of him yet because I can't just project. I think if Julian is let loose, and Steven, you know, Brennan did a great job of posting on our socials that clip of you talking about, like, I'm done with this holding Julian Sayin's hand. He has arguably the best arm talent and the most accurate arm in all of college football. Let it rip. Play Ohio State offensive football and let Julian Sayin be that guy. And if he does that, I think, number one, they don't lose. Number two, yeah, he ends up shooting up to number one for me. Not just because he beat Fernando, because he did it in a way that shows me everything that Julian Sayin is as a passer. Same goes for Dante Moore. If he shows up in the biggest games and he's like Dante Moore, whatever his best game was this season, he put up crazy numbers against Oklahoma State. Okay, the competition he faces is going to be much better than Oklahoma State. But if he's playing like close to that level against some of these best teams and he's playing close to that ceiling, I'm fine putting him at number one. I just didn't want to reward guys who I'm projecting instead of guys who have shown me. Fernando has been the best quarterback in college football this year. Has his team maybe given him more opportunity to do that? Yeah, sure. And that's fine. That's credit to Kurt Signetti. His quarterback won a Heisman. His quarterback is is leading the number one team in the country, undefeated in the college football playoff. That's fine. Fernando deserves to be number one because of that. But it would not surprise it. Like, I'm not going to what you were asking, Gillis. I'm not ruling out the possibility of, at the end of this thing, is Julian Sayin or even Dante Moore number one in the quarterbacks of college football this year? I'm not ruling that out, because if they play at what they can play at, or what we at least think they can get to, then yeah, that they can absolutely be number one. So I'm not even just saying if we get to Miami and Julian Sayin beats Dante Moore or he beats Fernando Mendoza, Julian Sayin is automatically number one in our rankings. I'd actually maybe even push back on that. If Julian Sayin plays the way he did in Indy and wins the same game that we saw in Indy, and instead of Indiana winning 13-10, it's Ohio State winning 17-13, I might sit here and say, okay, those two guys played against each other. They went 1-1. I think Fernando's still the better guy. I think he was still better this season. But if Julian plays to what we think Julian can do, then he can easily be number one. And I want Ohio State to let him do that. And I think Ohio State fans listening to this are telling themselves, please let him do that. That clip I referred to that Brendan posted, there's comments under it on TikTok that are like, Ryan Day's taking over play calling. This will look better. They're blaming the play calling. Play calling didn't let Julian do the thing. And then there's like one comment that's like, Julian Sayin is a young Dan Marino. So like, people obviously think if you let this guy be what he can be, then he can be number one. Like, this is not just a result of what's around him. They've been holding his hand, and it's frustrating because if you let it rip, maybe it fails. Sure, maybe it fails, and maybe he throws a pick and it costs Ohio State a game, and you're like, why didn't you just sit there and ride your defense to victory? You knew that, like, you just couldn't make a mistake. I don't know, man. Did you watch the Penn State game? Julian Sayin looked better against Penn State than Dante Moore looked against Penn State. And I know one was earlier in the season playing on the road in a whiteout, and one was at home against Ohio Stadium. But I don't know, man. You see those deep balls that Julian Sayin was throwing in that game? Like, that's what he can be. So it's a roundabout way of answering your question of, no, just beating Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore doesn't make Julian number one on this list for me. But if Julian Sayin plays like Julian Sayin can play, comparing Dante Moore to potentially a CJ Stroud run, CJ Stroud's in the same building that CJ Stroud was in. Let him play like CJ Stroud, because CJ Stroud didn't have the mobility that Dante Moore has. CJ Stroud had closer mobility to what Julian Sayin has, and that's fine, and closer mobility to what Fernando Mendoza has, and that's fine, because he has the arm talent to make up for that. Let Julian Sayin be Julian Sayin, and he can be number one on this list, to the point where, like, I don't know, maybe that's a bad point. I don't think Mendoza can beat Sayin, and Sayin still like goes to number one. But there is a world in which just Julian Sayin plays Julian Sayin ball. Maybe they lose a game because the defense wasn't that defense, or there's a fluky special teams play or something like that. I don't know. That's hypotheticals that we can get to down the road. But Julian Sayin can be the best quarterback in college football, no questions asked, if they just kind of let him do it. Just let him do it.
I have two thoughts to close this thing out. My first is Fernando Mendoza led the nation in touchdown passes with 33. Clock rules have killed our sport. We gotta go back. We gotta go back, man.
Yes, which is why I think it really ticked me off. This is the worst Heisman class we've had ever. This is like the worst Heisman winner we've ever had. It's like it's completely different circumstances now. Fernando Mendoza in 2019, would he have put up Joe Burrow numbers? Probably not. Would he have had like 40 to 45 touchdowns? Probably.
I mean, the thing about Joe Burrow's 60 touchdowns is he also had to throw 60 touchdowns. Like they weren't blowing. Like Indiana's defense is ridiculous. Fernando doesn't have to do that. The thing about Joe Burrow's Heisman Trophy campaign that year started in 2019 against Texas on the road. Go rewatch that Texas game. That was a 4-quarter dogfight of a football game where they had to score those points. So we got to go back, man.
Burrow threw for over 800 yards, 12 touchdowns, and had 2 more rushing touchdowns with 79 yards rushing in 2 playoff games.
Yeah, but one of those was because Oklahoma sucked.
I know. It's still insane.
Yeah, it is insane. But again, like it goes back to like Oklahoma can't play defense. We kept letting them in the playoff to get thrashed by everybody because they had one amazing game against Georgia in the Rose Bowl. And so we kept letting Lincoln Riley get into the playoff. It's more about we're going to reach a point here where it feels like in other sports, and maybe just because I like basketball, the offensive numbers are kind of going crazy. And in football right now, it's going the other way because clock rules in college football, everybody just runs too high, off coverage zones and whatnot. Like the defenses have gotten more sophisticated. But as a result, to Stefan, as you just said, everybody's looking at what Fernando Mendoza did this year as the guy who led the FBS in touchdowns. And they're looking at and comparing it to what Joe Burrow did in 2019, where it's like, dude, different clock rules. The games were longer. You had more plays. But also LSU was in more competitive games because they weren't dominating teams the way Indiana did this year outside of Penn State and Ohio State, obviously. So it's unfortunate that like part of the thing about college football is that there is a level of it that's like video games numbers. And then they get to the NFL and like, you're not going to throw for 50 touchdowns anymore. You need to chill out with that. And now it's so much like the NFL that Fernando Mendoza throwing 33 touchdowns in a year. We're all like, man, what an amazing year he had. But also, this was a terrible year for Heisman Trophy voters. I think Fernando Mendoza is the best quarterback in college football heading into the quarterfinals. I also think we've seen the best of Fernando Mendoza. And that's not saying that it's down from here, but like what we've seen, that's what he is. That's the bar that Julian.
And if he replicates that, Indiana could win a national championship.
Right. He just the bar he is at, he just needs to consistently be there. But I don't think there's more room for him to climb up. So that's the challenge that Dante Moore and Julian Sand are going to have to meet. And Moore before Sand, because he'll get to Fernando Mendoza before Julian Sand does, assuming like people win that. Assuming Oregon beats Texas Tech and Indiana beats Alabama. But Julian Sand and Dante Moore, I believe if Fernando Mendoza is a 9 out of 10 college quarterback, I think that Dante Moore and Julian Sand have the potential to be like 13 out of 10 college quarterbacks. But as we are all saying, we can't like use that in a ranking right now because this is not about projecting what somebody might do because we are not in the SEC. We are basing it off of what we have seen from these players through through 13 games. No one's played more than 13 games at this point, and we're projecting it that way. And as a result, those are our rankings. Get the text 614-350-3315. As you can see behind us, we're already in hotel rooms down here in Dallas. It's about 5:30 Central Time. The team will be here in a couple of hours. Monday, we'll have a full team media day where we'll get coaches, we'll get players, and we'll talk about a lot of these different things as Ohio State prepares to play Miami. That's number 2 versus number 7 in our quarterback rankings, but it's number 2 versus number 10 in the college football playoff rankings. Ohio State, Miami on Wednesday, New Year's Eve to kick off the quarterfinal. Shout out to everybody who was in the chat. You guys have been very active. We always appreciate that. We'll try to do one of these next week. I don't know if we have like a lockdown day for these right now because like the games are always in a random day, but we'll try to continue to do these once a week throughout the rest of the season because as you can see, Brennan is very good at this. I don't know how he did this. I don't know if I could do it, but he can do it very, very well. 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that for Stefan, for Andrew, and for Brennan. I'm Steven.